Hey guys, so I'm currently converting this old 90s mountain bike into a more modern drop bar gravel bike. And one of the first things that I need to deal with is the bottom bracket, because it is a one-piece crank in a very large American style bottom bracket. So I wanted to do this as a separate video because this is probably going to be a little bit in-depth to get this changed over, to put an adapter in to change it to a more modern BSA style bottom bracket. So it was kind of taking away from the main purpose of the conversion build, and I thought this would be an interesting standalone video anyway. So first up, let me just give you a quick close-up of how this one-piece crank bottom bracket looks. So the first thing you'll notice is that this American style BMX bottom bracket is much bigger than a European style bottom bracket shell. Now, as I said earlier, this is what's called a one-piece crank, and the reason for that is that this crank arm here is actually one full piece of metal that goes right through the bottom bracket and forms the other pedal on the other side of the bike. Now, removing this shouldn't be too difficult. It is a simple cup and cone style set of bearings inside here. The first thing that you need to do is remove this locking nut. Now, this has got a left-handed thread on it, which means it undoes in the opposite direction to a standard screw, so that spins clockwise to be removed, and then you have this notched washer here which helps keep the retaining screw in place here once you've got the locking nut on, so that can simply be pulled away. Now, once you've removed the locking nut and the washer, you'll find this threaded piece that forms part of the cup and cone that keeps the bearings in place. Now, this shouldn't be particularly tight because this is a cup and cone style bearing. This piece shouldn't be done up too tightly because all it needs to do is keep the bearings in place. It doesn't want to squeeze too hard on the bearings because then it would take too much for the crank to be spun round. So you should be able to undo this by hand. However, if you struggle to do that, you can just get a flat blade screwdriver in here and just slowly work it around. But this one, as I say, is only done up hand tight, so this is fairly simple to undo. And again, it's got a left-handed thread on it, so you will undo this in a clockwise direction. Oh, and actually, before I take that out completely, one thing I have forgotten to do is to take the pedals off. So I'm just going to get my trusty pedal spanner and work this pedal off. Now, this clearly hasn't come off in a number of years because it's putting up a little bit of a fight, but hopefully it shouldn't take too much to get it off. There we go. Now, we don't need to take the other pedal off because once we've removed the cup and cone bearings, this whole part of the crank will slide through the bottom bracket and go out of the other side. So the other pedal can stay on for now because we're not going to be using this set of cranks again anyway. So now we come back to removing the locking nut and the spacer, and then we can start undoing the cone assembly here. And you can just see the bearings there that are starting to come out. So there, as you can see, that is the cup and cone style bearing retainer. We can take out the caged bearings, and then the entire assembly, including the bearings, just comes out as so. And there is your one-piece crank. That's just one continuous piece of metal the whole way through the bottom bracket. But we can now get rid of that because the next thing we need to do is remove these bearing cups either side in readiness for the new bottom bracket adapter to go in. Now, I don't have either a bottom bracket or headset cup removal tool. However, if you saw my last video, you'll know that I just used a piece of threaded metal bar to place in one side and then used a hammer gently to go around until it knocked it all out. And that's essentially what I'm going to do this time as well. Now, I'm not going to be using these cups again, so I don't need to worry too much about damaging them. But what I want to be mindful of is that I don't damage any part of the bottom bracket shell because the adapter that I've got fits fairly snugly into the shell. So I don't want to cause any damage inside that might cause any lips or burrs or anything like that. That's then going to stop me pushing the bottom bracket adapter in squarely so that it doesn't sit properly. So I do need to be careful of that. I have to say that was fairly simple. They came out quite easily, which was quite nice. So now I just need to clean up the bottom bracket shell, and then I can start putting the adapter into place. Okay, so now the bottom bracket cups are out. I've got this Truvative American BMX bottom bracket to Euro bottom bracket adapter. Now essentially these are just two large metal collars with a thread inside for a BSA style bottom bracket, and these just slot in either side, reducing the size of the bottom bracket shell. Now, as some of you may know, bottom brackets will screw clockwise or anti-clockwise dependent on which side of the bike you're working on. The quickest rule of thumb that I found for this is that when you're tightening the bottom bracket, it always turns towards the back of the bike. Now, what that means is that these are bidirectional as well, in that one has a left-handed thread, one has a right-handed thread, and you don't want to mix those up because then the bottom bracket won't go in the right way when you try to put it in. Now, I know from research that the side of this collar adapter that accepts the screws, and you'll know that by it having a larger, deeper hole for the screw head to fit into, that is the left side of the bike, which then means that the other side has the left-handed thread for the drive side, the right-hand side of the bike. So just make sure if you're using these that you identify which side of the collar goes on which side of the bike. And actually, if you're in any doubt, what you can do is remove the collar from the bottom bracket and just play around with it on both sides, and you'll quickly figure out which side screws into which collar, because each side of the bottom bracket will only screw into its corresponding adapter. Now, before I put these in, the only other thing that you need to consider is that because there are 3 screws in here, you need to make sure that when they get pressed in either side of the bottom bracket shell, that these screws line up properly, because what you don't want is a screw to be going in at an angle, because then when you try to tighten it down, you'll end up with a kind of lateral force that could weaken the screw and ultimately weaken the whole bottom bracket over time. So just make sure that when you're putting it in, you can eyeball where the screw hole is going to be when you push the screw through, and you shouldn't go too far wrong. And then the last thing to do before putting these in is just to apply a little bit of grease. These parts are metal, and as obviously is the steel bottom bracket, and what you don't want happening over time is some galvanic corrosion, which is the process by where 2 pieces of metal will effectively weld together over time. So putting a little bit of grease around the collar and inside the bottom bracket shell will not only stop that happening, it should also help you push the 2 pieces in, because these are going to be quite snug. So let's get these put in now. Right, they really are quite snug, and I can't actually get that any further in by hand. So what I'm going to have to do is use the device that I came up with last time when I did my last gravel bike build, and that is essentially to use this threaded bar again with a couple of old pieces of scrap wood, and I will essentially push this through the bottom bracket and use this as a vise and slowly start doing up the screw to push the 2 sides of the bottom bracket together. Now, this worked pretty well with the headset cups on the last gravel bike build, so I have no doubt that this should work perfectly this time. So let's get on with it. Right, and that is the bottom bracket adapter in. The only thing left to do now is to put the 3 screws in using a 3mm hex head. Now, what you want to be cautious of when doing this is not tightening each one of the screws down at once. You want to do them a little bit at a time to stop any forces pushing one way or the other on either side of the bottom bracket. So once these are in, and you can just feel them start to bite just there, and then this one, when it starts to get just a little bit tight, then you can go around and do each one like a quarter of a turn each, just to make sure that they're all torqued up relatively the same, and that you aren't going to get any kind of lateral force both on the screws or on the bottom bracket adapter itself being twisted inwards or outwards. Right, so they are done up nice and tight now, although to be honest it was quite a snug fit anyway, so I'm not sure how much work the screws will be doing, although there is quite a lot of force that gets pushed down through the bottom bracket shell, so best to put them in there just in case. But now that's in, we can go ahead and start putting our bottom bracket in. Now, as I said before, the collar that removes from the side of a square taper BSA bottom bracket is the left-hand side of the bike. That essentially acts as like a locking nut for the bottom bracket. So I would always suggest putting in the drive side or the right-hand side first. And as I mentioned earlier, when screwing in a BSA bottom bracket, you generally want to spin them towards the back of the bike. So this one is turning counterclockwise, and then you can finally finish it off with your particular bottom bracket tool. This one in particular is a 20 spline tool for the BSA bottom bracket, and then this one also screws in towards the back of the bike, but this one is screwing clockwise instead of counterclockwise. And that's in, that's nice and tight. That bottom bracket is ready to go. You're now ready to put your square taper cranks onto there and carry on with the rest of your build. Now, this bottom bracket adapter cost me £16.50 on Amazon, so it's really not that expensive to convert one of these American style BMX bottom brackets to a more usual European bottom bracket style. So there's no need to throw any of these old frames away with the American style bottom bracket, and it really does show that you only really need one piece of kit, being the adapter, which only costs 16 quid anyway, to turn this into a bike that can be used for many years to come. If you're interested in seeing the full conversion of this frame into a modern drop bar gravel bike, that will be coming out next week, so stay tuned to the channel. If you haven't already, I would absolutely love it if you could subscribe to the channel, because that really helps me out. Not only does it let me know that people are enjoying the videos that I'm putting out, but it also moves me towards that goal of being able to make some money from this channel, which will ultimately mean I can make more content, better content, and that will hopefully be better for you guys. So yeah, if you could hit that subscribe button and also like and comment down below. If you've got any questions about this, I'm more than happy to answer them, so put them in the comments below. But again guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.